Welcome to Knuckle Sandwich MMA. Have we got a special show for you guys? I'm so excited. I've been waiting for a few weeks for this show. As you know, we have started a athlete series because we want to get more into the idea of combat sports as a whole. We love MMA and we love to talk about the UFC and all the fight cards and everything like that. But we want to bring you more information pertaining to combat sports, not only to combat sports, but our special guest today will be talking about combat, period. Okay. And I want to welcome my good friend, Nando, over here. All right. And then we've got our special guests. We have Clayton Mortensen, and we also have Dante Fratto. And these guys are going to give us a lot of really good information today. So I'm not going to go into who they are. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So Clayton, take it away, baby.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Clayton Mortensen. So we're going to be talking specifically about Krav Maga today, which I've been training in for about 10 years. I own a Krav Maga school in Clayton, Utah. I've had that for about 7 years. Prior to doing Krav Maga, though, I started out doing traditional martial arts. So I did karate as a kid, and then when I turned 18, I wanted to do something a little bit more serious. So I got into Muay Thai mainly. So I used to compete quite a bit in Muay Thai. I've had a couple of MMA fights, and then I'm bail enforcement and fugitive recovery agent for the state of Utah. So I've been able to put some of the skills that I've learned to use in practical application. So that's kind of my martial arts background.
That's awesome. What about you, Dante?
Dante Fratto. I started training Krav Maga at Clayton's gym 4.5 years ago. And like him, I had a background in traditional martial arts, Kenpo and Shintoshi karate. And while I was doing that in my youthful days, I also did some private security details.
All right. Well, thank you, guys. Now, one thing I want to let our viewers know is, well, you guys tell us, what is the definition? Because I know a lot of folks have not ever even heard of Krav Maga. Kind of give us your definition of what it is, what it's all about, and just go from there.
Well, literally, the literal abbreviation of Krav Maga, it's Hebrew, is close combat. Contact. Sorry. Oh my goodness. I'm thinking of that T-shirt we did. We made a T-shirt that had that on, so it's just ingrained into my frontal lobotomy.
Okay, and so now it's an Israeli fighting technique, right?
I actually originated in Czechoslovakia in the 1930s, and it actually evolved into Israel, where the IDF took it into their training for their forces. Correct?
Yeah, so basically the whole purpose of it, how it originated was they wanted a kind of a combat system that they could teach to all the soldiers. So everybody in Israel serves in the military for a short amount of time. So really what it started out as was an aggression immersion program, like just how to teach people how to be really aggressive and fight and not quit and have that mindset in a couple weeks on the military side. And then of course the civilian side is a little more like martial arts that you see like here, where, you know, it's a longer system. You can study for years and years and years and move up the ranks and get belts and all that stuff. So it's approached a little bit differently in the civilian side versus the military side. But basically, the main takeaway was that everything they wanted was something that was somewhat simple to learn, focused on like actual self-defense, right? Some martial arts are heavy on the art side of things. Krav is all martial. It's all about fighting, all about practicality and that type of thing.
Okay, so Dante, you mentioned close quarters combat. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that, what you mean by close quarters?
Well, I mean, we really want to, the way it's taught is we want to get in and get out. Get in fast, get out fast, go home. So a lot of our strikes are really for the soft points. And we're in martial arts, when you're competing, when you're hitting your target, you're not going through your target. In Krav Maga, we're taught to go through our target and destroy the target. We use a lot of elbows and knees, which is representative of that close combat. And I think if you want to add as well, Clayton.
Yeah, I mean, I think that touches on it pretty good. So, again, it is all a hand-to-hand combat system. And again, back to the military application, a lot of hand-to-hand combat in the military is focused on getting back to your weapon. And so that's another thing too. When you're hands-on with somebody or you don't have the time and space to get to that weapon, then you're trying to create space and access that so you can use those tools. And then of course for the civilians, same thing. It's just hand to hand. Like Dante said, get in, get out, finish it as fast as you can, be hyper aggressive in that time.
So if I understand you guys correctly, basically, and Clayton, you did mention this previously that there's almost, I don't want to say two different fighting styles, but for military, police, for example, and then civilians, it's kind of a different thing because as you just mentioned, civilians aren't trying to necessarily get back to a weapon that they don't have. They've got to use their extremities, right? Their legs, their hands, or whatever. So what you guys teach is different than you would teach for, like, if you were showing police officers the Krav Maga techniques. Is that correct?
Some of it's different. Basically, just to clarify too, so the civilian version is longer, drawn out over years, right? The military version is a little bit like shorter and condensed. And then in terms of like specific techniques like weapon retention and creating space, like a lot of that stuff still applies to, to both aspects of this, but the focus is just a little bit different for the military versus civilian side.
So we still do a lot of drills that do utilize weapons, whether it be a knife or a gun, whether we're disarming and trying to get to our weapon, and like Clayton mentioned, weapon retention. So some of that does carry over to the civilian side as well.
See, and that escaped me. That the guy you're fighting against could have a weapon.
Yeah.
Probably more often than not. I don't know. What do you got, Nando?
So the techniques are what are some of the techniques that you would use? Like is it to disable like front kicks to the knees? Is it like if someone's coming at you, what would I want to know in the beginning?
And I'll respond to that because due to my stature, if I'm generally going against a larger individual, I'll definitely want to try and get in and get out faster, because if I go toe to toe against a guy that's going to outweigh me by 50 to 100 pounds, I'll lose that battle. So to answer your question, one of my first attacks is their knee. I want to try and disable their standing platform, which should take them out of the fight. If not, then it's the soft targets, the temples, the throats. We even look at gouging eyes out. I mean, it's literally anything it takes to win the battle and go home.
So do you look at the stature of the person, like you teaching me? Would it be different than teaching a younger lady that's like 90 pounds, or like, or do we all start in the same basic moves?
I want to hear Clayton's side, but when I teach the same techniques no matter size, but I try and adapt it and say, okay, because you're a smaller individual, there's a young lady in Monday night's class that's 90 pounds. And so she needs to be fast and quick to go to those soft targets. She can't mess around. She literally also has to really focus on the principles of our rotation to increase our power of our strikes. Otherwise, a 90-pound woman is not going to be able to strike as hard as a 180-pound guy. So they have to really make up for that utilizing the rotation that we teach them.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, as a starting point, generally everything that's taught is going to be the same for a bigger person or a smaller person, and then, like Dante said, maybe slight adaptations. I mean, even if you are a bigger guy, like, we're still going to want to be going for soft targets and generate as much power as possible. So it's not a huge difference necessarily, but there definitely has to be a little bit more focus for the folks who are smaller. But throwing a right cross is throwing a right cross, no matter who you are. So a lot of it's going to be the same. And so one of the things that I like to, at least the way I approach Krav Maga, and the other thing too, is there's a lot of different schools and methods that are kind of flying under the banner of Krav Maga. So it is a little bit different depending on where you train.
Okay.
But I basically call it MMA with weapons and then remove some of the rules and that type of thing. So we still focus a lot on good striking, grappling, position, head movement, foot movement, all that stuff. And then just add in all the other stuff that you don't necessarily get in some of the other combat sports.
So, in listening to your description and Dante's as well, so you guys have, even though you're from the same, is it called an academy?
Just called a gym.
Okay, just a gym. So, you guys have different, even though you're teaching Krav Maga, you have different, I guess, flavors or styles for each of you. You're not just doing, okay, every move is exactly this way, or how does it work? Because I don't know much about martial arts as far as practicing it myself, but I do know that there's certain movements and different things that you do. But as two different instructors, and your emphasis may be slightly different than one another. Are the basic moves the same, or is it in a different different combination that you teach? So I guess what I'm asking is, how does it differ between the two of you, as you're teaching right now?
Well, outside of the youthfulness and him being better looking, I'll address that. We still have to maintain the same techniques. I mean, so whatever Clayton or the format is, we still have to maintain that this is how you do a cross, or this is how you do a clinch move. Then it's up to the instructors to maybe add their own flavor to some drills afterwards, as far as how they incorporate those and maybe come up with some different combinations. But for the most part, our foundation is the same throughout all the instructors.
Yeah, and just to add to that too, so we focus a lot on everything being principle based, right? Like self-defense techniques, I don't actually really like that term, because so many self-defense instructors teach, okay, if you get attacked this way, you're going to respond this way, and we know that's just not practical, right? Yeah. So what matters is that we are dealing with the immediate threat, throwing counter strikes as fast as we can to good targets, and then everything else, like I mentioned, good position, lots of strikes, knowing how to grapple. So that it's the principles behind it. That's what's really important. Not like, okay, if they choke you this way, you're going to do exactly this, right? We can workshop some of those things, but it's going to vary a little bit in terms of how we're actually teaching it, as long as we're hitting the same core principles.
Okay. All right. That's great information. I also wanted to ask you, who are the type of people that are coming, to your gym, wanting to learn this technique? And I'm sure that there are all walks of life, but I guess what I'm asking, what I want to get down to is, what is the reason why people would come to learn this? That they tell you guys, what's the reason why?
Yeah, so we get definitely a variety of people. And this is one thing I really like about our gym is we have, I think my oldest student is in his 70s, and then we teach kids down to as young as 5 years old. But really, the type of people who approach us, they want to learn some skills. They want to, learn obviously the self-defense aspect of it, maybe get in shape, but they're not necessarily looking to go compete, right? There's nothing wrong with that, obviously. I love MMA, I love Muay Thai, I love all the combat sports. But for people who are starting in martial arts in their 50s, they're probably not going to want to go that route, right? So we get those types of people. And then, of course, we have a lot of military and law enforcement that train with us as well.
Okay.
Nando?
So do you do like live sparring, and if you do, is it padded? Like are you wearing pads when you do live sparring?
Yeah.
It's mouth guards, shin guards, 12-ounce boxing gloves. If they want to wear headgear, they can wear headgear. And, you know, we try to do the best we can to make sure it's a safe environment, because we certainly don't want, you know, someone to go in there and spar and get hurt. I mean, there is a potential of injury, like any contact sport. But we also try and tell new students, there's some that jump in, they're so excited. They're like, I've seen this on TV and I want to learn how to spar. We generally say to spend about 3 to 5 months, depending upon their ability, in just the day-to-day Krav Maga training before they transition into the sparring class.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, so we spar just like any other, well, I shouldn't say any other martial arts gym, but more like an MMA style, right?
Mhm.
A lot of, and this is where a lot of even Krav Maga schools or self-defense schools get it wrong, where they go, well, we can't spar because it's too dangerous, because we'd be gouging eyes out and stuff like that. And I think that's a little bit of an excuse, right? Like, obviously when you're sparring, you have to do it in a safe manner, but you have to be exposed to getting hit and the exhaustion that comes from that and going against somebody that is resisting you. So yeah, does it change a little bit? Of course, but 99% of self-defense and fighting is what it would be like in a, you know, striking or grappling type situation. So yeah, we definitely spar. And like Dante already mentioned, it's just kind of typical MMA style gear. So either boxing gloves or MMA gloves, shin guards, mouth guard, cup.
Mhm.
Does that mean we're going for knees and eyes? No, of course not. But we're still, you know, striking and going fairly heavy on the contact.
Well, you know, and that would make sense to me. You know, at the very beginning, Dante mentioned going through a target, and you have to factor in it. And I'm just speculating from, you know, somebody that doesn't know anything about Krav Maga, but I'm speculating that you also have to deal with that adrenaline dump, right? Because if you're going through a target, you're exerting a lot of energy at, you know, whether, as you mentioned, the soft target, whether you're going for a knee, you're going for something, you're going to go through that target. So your mindset is not, you know, to the throat or whatever, but, you know, and so as Anando was saying with the sparring, that kind of gives you that real time feeling of spending that adrenaline, right? And getting that adrenaline rush to see how your body would react in a real situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's as close as you can get to real fighting in a safe environment, right? Is putting pads on and sparring. And, you know, like I mentioned, there's still some rules you have to respect in a training environment. But yeah, I mean, if you never do anything against a live opponent that's trying to hurt you or is resisting you, then you're not going to get that same adrenaline response. One of the things that I just have to talk about with my instructors, my students, like, we accept that all training is flawed because it's training, it's not the real thing, right?
Mhm.
Our goal is to bridge the gap between what really happens in our training, but we accept that it's never going to be on the same level, because you just can't train that way, right? It's not safe. It's not even possible to create, right? But the goal is to, you know, do things that mimic aspects of real life, right? And sparring is about as close as we can get to a real fight and still, you know, be safe.
Okay. So Dante, let me ask you a question. How would you, you know, what would you say to somebody who wants to do something like this, but is afraid? Like, what kind of information would you give them if somebody's like, oh man, that, you know, not simply that I just can't do it or I'm out of shape or anything like that, but simply because I'm afraid, because if I do that, then that situation could possibly happen to me. I don't know.
That's a great question. And it's interesting because how I got into this is my wife. She saw this and she knew that I had an interest in Krav Maga, and she has no martial arts background. She has no contact sports. She doesn't even like MMA. So for her to go from that, you know, I'm a little frightened to go in here, to where she actually tested her first belt. I think it was a year and a half after we joined, somewhere in there.
Mhm.
But we do have a lot of students that come in and they're immediately frightened, like, oh, you know, I don't want to get hit, you know, it's going to hurt. And so what we try and convey to those students or anyone just wanting to sign up is, We want them to go at their own pace and their own comfort level. We're not forcing violence on anybody, but sadly, 1 in 3 women will be violently attacked. And so the odds of them experiencing that are very high. And so we kind of want to get past that. And I'll give you an example. There's a couple, they're probably in their late 40s, that joined together, and the woman is a little bit more timid. And we did a drill 2 Mondays ago to try and raise that adrenaline. And where we put them at one end, and she had to, strike me. And then she worked her way up through a number of students who were holding pads and were striking those pads. And as they were pushing her, tapping her from behind, and then she would end with 5 groin kicks. So it was high stimulation. She got done. She was so excited that she did it. When she went to high five me, she hit me in the face because she just had that adrenaline.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Her husband was super excited. She was like, I did it. And so those are the things that I love seeing. I know Clayton does too, where you have a student that has that, apprehension, and yet crosses a threshold for whatever it might be, and they just have this rush of joy and accomplishment.
Excellent. That's a great example too. That's a great example. What do you got on that, Clayton? Anything else to add to that particular one?
Yeah, I would say people being afraid or nervous, or whatever word you want to use for coming into training, is probably the most common thing that keeps people from training. And it's just like anything else, right? I mean, we talk about heavy sparring and doing all this stuff, but of course we don't start out that way, right? I mean, we start you from the very beginning, stances, striking, on pads. Even just something as simple as holding a pad is acclimation of contact and just getting used to, that impact a little bit without fully putting on 16-ounce gloves and sparring, right? So there is a progression to build people's, confidence and their technique and their ability before we throw them into these, like an actual sparring type scenario, right? And so like the drill that Dante mentioned, I mean, that's what that is, right? It's just a way to push the adrenaline, but they're not quite sparring yet, right? Obviously, you eventually have to do that. But, we build you up to that point. And it's really the whole point of self-defense is safety, right? So we have a very strong emphasis on safety in the classes in terms of how we're striking, holding pads, gear, that type of thing. So we make sure that it's safe as possible, and that we're, having people do stuff that's in their ability, and then just pushing them from there.
Okay, so I'm gonna let Nando ask the next question, but before that, I want to play the devil's advocate here. Okay, so we're talking about all this good stuff, right? What happens, and how do you guys handle situations of somebody that does get hurt, or not hurt, like broken bones or gouged eyeballs or anything like that? But I'm just saying, in a sparring situation where somebody's coming along and they're feeling confident and they're feeling good, but they get smacked pretty good, and then they lose a little bit of that confidence, like the fear comes back maybe. How do you guys handle that situation so that you keep that person still growing and wanting to keep coming back? Because there's been times, I used to box where some kid would get hit really hard and he never came back. So what do you guys do as instructors in situations like that?
For me, I mean, and I think maybe we should probably both answer it, because it might be slightly different. One, because he's got more exposure in his tenure as teaching than I do. But from what I've seen, there's been some minor injuries, like maybe someone got popped a little hard or in the nose, and at that point, we stop it immediately and ask the individual, are they okay? Clayton was cognizant enough to send a lot of his instructors to just some simple first aid training so that we can at least, address it. We want to make sure that they're emotionally sound. I mean, because some people react differently when they get hurt or hit harder than others. There's been, I think I've seen maybe one student cry. Maybe one, just one. Yeah. Besides me, okay, if you count me, there's 2. And so you definitely want to counsel them. You want to separate them from the group. You know, there's an area where I took that individual out in the hallway, you know, so she didn't feel like they were, you know, the center of attention, and calmed them down. And once they got a little bit more calm, they realized it was more just a shock of, I got hit. It wasn't so bad after all. I think there's only been poor Rich is the one that's got hurt the most.
Yeah. Yeah. So all that I agree with for sure. I think a lot of it is just about building their confidence back up though, right? So there's a very high attrition rate when people start sparring in martial arts for that reason, right? They might be feeling good and then, you know, they're with somebody who's out of control, or, you know, sometimes accidents happen, right? So I think it's really important just to, you know, like Dante mentioned, take them aside and have a conversation with them, and then be really careful how you move forward with that person. I may have them only spar with people who are a little bit more experienced and who can scale their power and their speed and really match the level of that person versus just, you know, wailing on them and dominating them. Because if that's your experience, especially right out of the gate, like, yeah, you're definitely not going to want to come back and keep training, which means you're not going to get better. So really, it's just about scaling and building that confidence back up.
Well,
And
see,
we
and
try to-
I knew that was a tough question because you both looked at each other like, okay, how are we gonna answer this? But here's the thing that I noticed. Okay, you guys like did one of these, and the reason why I asked that because what you just told me, both of you, is that that you care about the student, right? And the idea is certainly, yeah, you might feel some pain during sparring or during training or whatever, but that's part of the whole thing. And we're still going to bring you through this so that when something, if you know, you don't want anything to happen. I mean, you want to have those tools in your toolbox. You don't necessarily go out looking for a fight, right? But when it happens, then you brought them through that shaking of their confidence, maybe, to getting through that emotionally and psychologically, so that if something were to happen in real life, they're able to defend themselves and take care of business rather than fold like a lawn chair.
Yeah, and we try to, as instructors, when we start a class, we try and be cognizant of all the students, and we'll ask, you know, does anybody have any injuries? Does anybody have any triggers? You know, maybe tonight we might be doing some choke defenses. So we want to make sure that all the students feel comfortable about being choked. When I say choke, not necessarily that we're throttling their throat. You know, we're obviously, like Clayton said earlier, you know, we're trying to train as realistic as possible without injuring anybody or giving them a new trigger point.
Excellent. That's great. See, and that's valuable information for me because I'm thinking about doing this, you guys.
Come on, Alex.
All right, Nando. So we're getting close to our time, you guys. But Nando, I want to see you. Do you have any other questions you want to ask real quick?
Yeah, I just want to ask like two questions. You were speaking about the belt system. So how many like belts is there, and what is the order of like of the system you have?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So every school handles this differently. Kind of a side note is that in Israel, they wear belts. Like in a lot of schools in the United States stopped wearing belts. And it was really like a marketing thing where they're like, no belts, no rules, like all this stuff. And there is a belt system in Krav Maga. So because we keep it really informal at my gym, we're not wearing uniforms. It's just regular gym clothes. We don't wear belts either, but we do have a level system associated with the belts. And of course, just like any other system, within each level, there's a set curriculum and time and a testing process. So there's 7 levels or 7 belts. And yeah, it's in terms of the order, I'll have to think about this because that's how little we think about it. But it's white, yellow, orange, green, blue, brown, and black.
How long does it usually take someone to get black? Is it like 7 years? Is it just depending on and how do you go to a new belt system? Is there like like a type of test that I need to take, or is it just by what you see my growth being?
Mhm. So I'm going to keep going if that's
No,
okay.
I'm gonna add to it. I'm loving this.
It's a combination of the two, right? So there's not necessarily a time requirement. It really is about proficiency, and being able to demonstrate certain abilities under stress. And then a lot of it too is just showing aggression, not quitting, that type of thing. Like your very first test that you take when you transition from white belt to yellow belt, or from level 1 to level 2, is about 3 hours long, right? And a lot of what we're looking for is just, can you keep fighting even when you're exhausted? You know, at the very end of demonstrating all the techniques on pads, then you're going to spar, and we want to see that you can still, you know, keep going, because mentally it's really challenging as well. So it's not based on time necessarily, or how many classes. You know, there's an average of, you know, what it would take to move from one level to the next. But yeah, there is a set curriculum in each level. You have to demonstrate it, and then we need to see, like I already mentioned, the aggression and that type of thing. Getting to black belt, it varies. It's like 6 to 10 years is kind of the average, depending on, you know, the school. For me, it took me about 6 years, and yeah, so it just kind of varies.
Okay.
And those, when you mentioned the tests, as far as the exhaustion, when I did my first test, you know, you initially think, okay, I know this is going to be a 3-hour test, so I'm going to start pacing myself. And there's some people that have this ability to tell that you're pacing yourself, and will just sit there and ride you even harder and say, hey, you know, if you guys are going to pace yourself, we'll just start all over. And if you're an hour into this and you hear that from Clayton, you really question your life choices at that moment.
Yeah, so the expectation is that you're giving 100% from start to finish, right? And we know that your 100% at the beginning is going to be here, and 3 hours in, it's going to be here. That's okay. It's like running a marathon, and we expect you to sprint, right? Which by the end, you're probably going to be crawling, but that's just part of the mindset and the aggression that you have to have in fighting. You know, it's not, does everything look perfect, right? Because we know fighting is so chaotic and unpredictable. A lot of it is just about the mindset and the will to fight, and then having the techniques to back it up. So yeah, it's definitely a pretty grueling process. My black belt test was 9 hours of just nonstop.
Okay, so another question I wanted to ask you guys is, tell me the official name of the gym, where it's located, and then I'd like to know the kind of walk us through, take us through a virtual tour of the gym, of what someone should expect when they walk in there, and that kind of stuff. The environment, I guess.
Yeah, so the name of my gym is called Fortified Krav Maga. We're in Layton, Utah, kind of off Sugar Street and Gentile, that area. When you walk in, there's a reception desk. We've got a couple iPads. That's where people would sign in, so we can track classes and make sure people are, you know, showing up. If you don't come for a couple weeks, we usually reach out to you and try and get you back in to keep training. And then from there, we've got 2 training floors. I've got a 2,400 square foot training floor downstairs, which is where we do most of the adult classes. And then I've got a 2,000 square foot training floor upstairs that we use for like private lessons, and then also our kids program as well. So it's pretty decent sized facility. In terms of the environment, though, that's one thing I really like about the gym is, you know, I don't even have to tell people. Like, my students and instructors are just really welcoming to new people. We understand how nerve-wracking it can be to come into an environment like that and, you know, not really know what you're doing or not know anybody. And people really do a great job of going out of your way to make you feel comfortable that way. They're going to punch you later, but they're at least going to be welcoming about it.
It's the nicest violent experience you have.
So, so people, you know, and you just hit on it, Dante, or Clayton, but I wanted to dig in a little bit more. And again, this is if I were a first timer, you know, sometimes people get intimidated when they go to the gym because you got the big muscle bound, you know, dudes, you know, pressing weights and walking around, and they got, you know, a little bit of attitude. And so I want to, you know, put myself as far as the person that's really shy, maybe a little nervous, that kind of a thing. Like you said, not knowing what to expect. People are going out of their way. But if it, you know, if I told you, hey, I'd love to come and check out your gym, but I had a bad experience over here, I had a bad experience over there, you know, I guess what would you tell me, you know, to help me to feel more comfortable?
Yeah, and it is something that we encounter quite a bit. So I'll gauge kind of, you know, the individual, and if they have prior experience, if they don't, if they have injuries they're working around, that type of thing. So I'll get a lot of this information before you even step foot in the gym, just when we're on the phone and I'm getting to know you a little bit and building that rapport. And so for some people, they're fine to just jump straight into a class, and, you know, a beginner class, of course, and follow along. And then there's other people where we'll set up a time where you'll do a one-on-one with myself or, excuse me, one of my other instructors, where we just go really slow, start from the very beginning. It's a little bit less overwhelming. So it really depends. But we definitely give people the opportunity to come in and try it out and see if it's a good fit for them and a good fit for us, right? Because we want to, you know, protect our culture and make sure that we have people that are willing to learn and have a good attitude and that type of thing. So,
see, and that was the next question I asked. I'll direct it to Dante. So what if somebody isn't a good fit for you guys, you know, or what if you just simply look at somebody and just say, this isn't, you know, it's not right for you? I mean, how do you resolve that issue?
To my knowledge, I've not had any in my class. I know that Clayton has made comment of there were actually 2 students that he did ask never to come back. And I did have one student in a class that was a little bit more aggressive than he should be, and he was real excited about wanting to spar. And then I kind of pulled him aside and just said, you know, you need to tone it down a little bit. I really want you to focus on your technique. And, you know, I like to always say, you know, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. You're not here to impress anybody, and we want to see you do the technique correctly. And generally, most of them calm down. It may not be that class, but, you know, we as instructors kind of counsel or let each other know, hey, by the way, you know, just watch this individual and help them understand they need to tone it down. They need not maybe be as aggressive. Even though that is our martial or our style is being aggressive, but at the same time, we want that individual to be open to learning and not hurting other students.
Okay, so a question that has been driving me crazy since we started this interview. I got to ask, and I want feedback from both of you because you've come from different backgrounds. So you mentioned your background in different martial arts. How did you end up with Krav Maga and why?
You are.
okay, awesome. Yeah, so I think, honestly, I saw one of the documentaries that probably everybody's seen, like Fight Quest or something like that, about it, and it looks pretty intriguing. The biggest thing that led me to it is again, I have a Muay Thai background, a traditional background, and a little bit of jiu-jitsu, and I was a wrestler. Like, so I've done a lot of, you know, the different facets. And when I saw Krav, at least the way that the gym I trained at, again, there's so many different ways Krav Maga is taught, but the gym I started out, we get a grapple, we get a spar, we get to do all the same stuff, and then adding in some of the weapons and some of the other things that I had never done in the other systems or places that I've trained at. So for me, it was just exciting because I'm like, hey, we got to do everything now, right? Not just focusing on one thing. And, you know, when you're doing Muay Thai, I love it, but all you're doing is striking, lots of pad work and sparring. So it was just a good mix and just a good way to encompass everything that I wanted to do. And then just haven't really looked back since then.
Very cool. How about you, Dante?
Similar. There was a program on the History Channel where a former NFL player and an MMA fighter would travel the world, and they would immerse themselves in a specific fighting style, whether it be
Oh,
jujitsu.
I've seen that.
Yeah, and they did a, a Krav Maga one. I'm like, man, these guys are some bad A's, man. I mean, these guys are two solid athletes, and they're getting their butts kicked. I want in, and I kind of let it die. And my wife, I think it was a social media feed that she saw that Clayton's gym was running this 8-week boot camp. And so we signed up for that. And it was mostly a CrossFit kind of a program. It kind of did a little bit of CrossFit, a little bit of striking. And we both had so much fun with it that we decided, let's just sign up. And we both became lifetime members. It was, for us, a fun thing to do together. And kind of what Clayton mentioned earlier is it gave us, some fitness. It also gave us some skills. And, my wife went from, again, not having any experience to testing to being someone that I might be a little frightened of in a dark alley.
Nice.
That is phenomenal. And I think, Nando, you got a question for him?
Yeah, I wanted to go and talk about the kids. So when you're teaching the kids, they're not like obviously like full sparring, but do you teach them how to defend themselves against someone like your size? Because I mean, I'm scared for my child if somebody like big like that, if he would know how to protect himself, not even protect himself, but get some hits in and get moving. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. So the way we approach the kids program is similar to the adults. There's a little bit more of like the life skills stuff involved as well. They're a lot more structured and formal. Like they actually do wear belts and uniforms. But in terms of the self-defense aspect, right? I mean, that's our focus for the adults. It's our focus for the kids. And, I mean, like size matters when it comes to fighting, right? So, but we can at least start teaching those skills at an early age and help build their confidence and that type of thing. Is it realistic to say that a 5-year-old is going to be able to fight somebody off my size? Yeah, I mean, there are circumstances where 12-year-old girls fight off full-grown men, but there's a lot of psychology behind that and some other stuff we could discuss. But what's important, a lot of it is developing the awareness and the confidence. And then as they get older and they get better, bigger and stronger, then that foundation's already laid. And I'm not saying that it's not possible, but you have to set realistic expectations as well in terms of, what a 5 to 12-year-old child is capable of.
Well, that leads to a question that I have for you guys. Dante, I'll ask you first. If a parent is learning Krav Maga, okay, learning these kinds of things, and they have a child, because I know Nando has a young son, but is there things that the parent can like help? And I know this is out of the realm, but I'm just talking about the things that they learn with the discipline of your gym, Krav Maga. And this is a long way around the barn, you guys, but I think it's relevant based on what Nando said, and that is, can a parent that's learning from your gym also pass some things to keep their child safe, like, run first, ask questions later, don't worry about, trying to defend. If it's somebody the size of Clayton, for example, can a parent, share that kind of information, understanding, like you said, Clayton, that let's manage expectations. Let's be realistic that a 5-year-old is not going to stop somebody like you, right? Somebody, a guy that size, but be able to, that a parent can then pass that down to their kids of, I know what's realistic. I know what's, and how to protect my kid. Or even in a situation where somebody's coming up to snatch your kid and you're there and you go to protect your son, because that's not uncommon of somebody getting snatched in a mall or outside of a grocery store or something like that, to protect your family.
So if I'm hearing this correctly, let's just say hypothetically, I trained here for 6 months and I'm like, hey, I go home to my kids, I'm like, I'm going to teach you Krav Maga. I don't necessarily think that that's probably the best thing to do, because obviously to be an instructor, we have to go through a 3-day course. But if they want to take some simple fundamentals and say, okay, if someone does come up to you, I want you to kick them in the groin as many times as you can while screaming loudly, get away. I think that's probably some skills that they could potentially share with their children. I know that there's a couple of younger kids in the kids program, excuse me, it's redundant, that their parents have gone ahead and bought them a heavy back so they both can practice at home. So they both can develop their skills and learn together. And so, yes, there are some things. In fact, at the end of when I was teaching some of the kids' classes, all the instructors do this. They stop the class about 5 to 10 minutes before the end time, and they sit down and they start talking about, okay, what did you learn? What was some of the key takeaways? And then they also, spend the time in saying, hey, we're not here to look for a fight. We just want you guys to understand that you can fight back. You can, punch and kick and scream. And that's one of the drills we teach them is every time they punch or kick, we want them to scream, get away, because it brings attention to that situation where another adult may be able to step in. Because according to the point, yes, a 5-year-old's not going to stave off he or I, but if there's enough hollering, screaming, it might get someone else's attention to where they step in and save that child from being abducted.
Yeah, I like that.
Great.
And just to add on to that a little bit too, this may not quite be answering your question, but it is an important comment that I want to just expand on a little bit. So like one of the things that's important to understand, like there's a big difference or big disparity between like ego violence, sport violence, and then actual criminal violence. And a lot of the situations in terms of like abductions and stuff like that, those people aren't really looking for a challenge, right? That's a lot different than somebody stepping into the ring with an agreed upon set of rules, training. You're looking for a challenge, right? Those types of situations are different. So if that person thinks they're going to assert their will or their dominance on this person, and then all of a sudden they're getting, kicked in the groin, scratched in the eyes, anything, honestly, like noise is being made. And now it's not as simple as originally anticipated. And that right there is really valuable. Especially when we're talking about, older versus younger type people. Like there are 12, 13-year-old girls that fight off full grown men, like I mentioned earlier, and you see it in the news about once a year, but of course it happens more. And a lot of it is just that. It's just that, this isn't what I expected. This is too much attention and I'm going to move on. Right. It's just not.
Wow. Wow. I mean, even if this whole interview culminated to that is just amazing.
Beautiful. I like it.
Impressive, valuable information. I can't get over it. I'm getting chills over here because in today's world, it's a reality, right? It's a reality of kids getting snatched and having to, fend off attackers. And that's just a reality. And what you guys offer is truly and the culture that we're getting from you guys is just really amazing. It's something that people, if you guys are watching this this interview, is something that you should look into because it sounds like they have thought of all of these various not only scenarios, but the culture that they're building and that they have at their gym is as important as the technique that they're teaching you. So I think I want to highly recommend these guys because I think it's really important in this day and age. And one question I want to ask before we end this, because I know you guys need to leave, but I do want, and I don't want to respect your time, but one question I want to have, and Nando and I have discussed this, is it possible for us to come and do another podcast from your gym, showing some sparring and showing the gym itself and that kind of a thing, and taking people through and talking to some of the students or whatever you guys would feel comfortable with. Can we do something like that?
Well, I can't because he's the owner, but I'm going to answer that if it were up to me with a big hell yeah.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, that sounds fantastic. So we'll set something up with you guys to come out and do a podcast from there. I think it'd be amazing. And I think people will get a sense of everything that you just talked about. They'll see it and hopefully we'll get you know, and just so you guys know, from Knuckle Sandwich MMA, from Nando and myself, we're not here to create a commercial for these guys. We are here to give you insight into something that's you may not have ever heard about, but that's relevant in our life right now, and that can help. And you know, with fitness, with mental acuity, with defense, all of these things, and these guys have the right stuff, and that's why we're doing this, and that's why I think it's important. So, Clayton, Dante, thank you so much for taking the time. You really opened up mine and Nando's. I mean, did they get you, Nando?
Yeah, this is awesome.
Anyway, we're really grateful that you took part in this, and we will set something up, because look for this, you guys. Part 2 of this interview, and we're going to be on site, and it's going to be a lot of fun and very educational. So we look forward to that. And we also want to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Clayton, Dante, Merry Christmas to you and yours, to your staff at the gym, your families, all that good stuff. And we'll see you on the flip side. Oh yeah, don't forget, smash that like button, subscribe, share, do everything that's possible to get this word out, because what these guys shared with us today is super, super important. All right, guys, we'll see you on the flip side.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.